So David Thornton, thank you for joining us. Fit Show TV, effectively. But really what we want to do is we want to talk to people that are interesting in the industry, and we want to bring a point of view, not just based on the Fit Show, in fact, on the contrary. So you are chosen to be one of the early versions of what we regard as interesting people. But you've certainly made your mark in recent years. With several awards for the window company, but I wonder how much people actually know about the window company Contracts Limited. Tell me something about yourselves.
Well, we started over 20 years ago now, and the company started in a spare bedroom of mine, and then it moved to the bottom of the garden, and then eventually it ended up in Beehive Lane in Chelmsford with really quite a nice operation, a good size. We're still a family business, and I think that's been important. It brings its own problems, succession amongst them. It's always difficult to think that somebody else is going to do as good a job as you.
Even your own offspring.
Even your own offspring, but they are good, and they've been able to jump into little parts of the company and make them their own. And we've got an overall strategy, and it's vitally important. People need to know where they are. They've even all got copies of my will. So there is no
copy.
Yeah.
You talk about succession, and actually, let's get straight into that. We'll talk a little bit more about your what you do as a speciality, if you like, specialism in your business.
Yeah.
But on the issue of succession, I've long been fascinated. We've reached the situation where the founders of the replacement window and the double glazing industry, if you will, that first generation are all aging now, even going back to the old Williams days, of Anglian windows, said to be the founder effectively of the double glazing industry. That second generation, even the third generation's coming on now. Have they got what it takes generally to carry on this industry as it has been?
I think they have what it takes, but it's a different something that they have. I think in the first stages of a business, it's usually entrepreneurial, and by definition, entrepreneurs take more risks. The next generation are likely to take less risks, and if there are less risks, I mean, it's not always exactly so, but it means they're less flexible because there becomes a set pattern. They're not quite so quick on their feet, and when it gets to the third generation, I think that's probably true as well. But it is something that is a natural progression. You can't have that initial stage forever. That's how businesses are founded. That's how they get established. And that was my part in it, if you like. I have to stand back now, and I do in lots of areas. I like two areas to keep for myself. One is PR, and the other is cash flow. I do like the cash flow and what's happening with that. But in the other areas, the day-to-day stuff, I try and stay out. I still give advice. We still have weekly meetings. But that's, if I don't let them do it, they're never going to make their own mistakes. They're not going to find out. But hopefully there won't be too serious mistakes at this stage. But if I didn't start some years ago with that, when I shuffle off this mortal coil, they would be left to get on with it. I didn't want that. I wanted preparation. I think that's what we've done.
Okay. Now let's go back to the original point. So exactly what does your business do now? Has it evolved? Has it evolved much?
When we first started off, we were in the domestic sector, and I realized, and I just speak for me, I realized that I was only ever about 6 weeks away from death. because nobody wants to wait much longer than that for their windows. And if an order didn't come in for 6 weeks, end of business. And I also had 1,000 Mrs. Jones, if I can put it that way, telephoning me to tell me that if they laid on the floor and looked upwards, there was a scratch underneath the handle. I didn't want to be in that domestic side anymore. I didn't like Mrs. Jones's side, because that's a jovial point, but I didn't like that 6 weeks away from death. So I wanted to go into contract work, and that morphed into social housing. There we have contracts that can be 5 years in duration, and we've had some very successful, really successful contracts that we've run, and one has led to the other. We have never advertised, ever. So we then looked at new build. New build is a totally different animal, and very difficult to control at times, because there are so many other trades involved, so many other variables. It's not just my windows. So I never allow the new build size to go above 1/3 of our turnover. And I try and impress that on the next generation, because it's very easy to achieve turnover with new build, but the risk is much higher. I want most of the risk to be in 1/3 and the lesser risk to be in 2/3. And that's how we run.
So better margins, yeah. Essentially better margins on local authority, public sector than on new build.
There's not as much difference as you would think. Okay. We do not we don't buy contracts. If we can't make the correct margin, I'd rather not be involved in that contract. No point.
How do you feel? I mean, you're in two really quite distinct sectors, albeit there has been a rolling out, if you like, by the government, a recognition of the housing shortage, and therefore theoretically a boom before lockdown happened, a boom in the new build sector, as well as obviously we've got a continuation of the refurbishment of public sector properties. Mm-hmm. How do you see those businesses operating now and in the light of lockdown?
In our own area, I have to break the new build down into different parts, because you've got new houses, as you're rightly saying there, but you've also got high-end developments where you'll have shops and offices and residential as a mix, high-end residential. That's the end we're in, as opposed to the main house builders that you might have been referring to. How is it going forward in that sector? The high end seems to be holding up. We've got work well into past Easter 21. So in that area, we're quietly confident. And the same, I'm glad to say, in the social housing. But we are very aware that this was 130 billion the government has spent so far in the COVID outbreak, and another 150 billion that the Bank of England is going to have ready to make the economy work. This money is going to have to come back. There are going to be cuts, and we are working on a probably 25% cut in orders, the value of orders from a particular client. This means we need a couple more clients.
How will you go about that?
We have always a pipeline, and that pipeline is red, amber and green. I'm pulling in some of the ones that would have been in amber or red and targeting them. It's quite as simple as that. There might be a 25% cut in the orders, but that doesn't have to be 25% turnover cut for the window company. We have to look after our own pipeline, and we will go out there and get the orders that we need. We focus on our own business.
I've referred to lockdown already. Were you prepared for it? Did it come as a shock? You come back from quite a lengthy holiday out to the Far, they included the Far East.
Yeah, I flew back from Shanghai the day before British Airways stopped flying. So that was handy. Otherwise, instead of learning to play the piano, which is what I've been doing in lockdown, I'd have been learning to speak Chinese. But I did get back, and we already knew, because we went out via Beijing in December, and already there were cases. It was starting to be serious there. So we had an idea that it would spread. When it got serious, when we got back, we looked at all of our contracts, and we ordered enough actual materials for 2 weeks of fitting on every contract, because we didn't know which one would come back quickest. So we did it for all of them, and that has been an absolute godsend. All right, it's investing a little money, but we're in the position where we're able to do that, and it's paid dividends. As soon as any of our clients say you can start work, we start. We don't have to go out and survey and then find a spot on the fabricators. We'll make something for the window company this week. No, we've had time to let the fabricator get back into some sort of condition. So it's been good. We're at the end nearly of those 2 weeks, and we have been surveying and ordering from our suppliers during that period. It should go forward. I think by the end of July, all of our main social housing contracts will be back up to speed.
And how have your suppliers responded? Have they been very positive? Have they been there for you?
They've been excellent. Even suppliers that have got problems, albeit differing problems. You'll have the smaller company that just takes longer to get up and running. And as we know in our industry at the moment, there is consolidation, there's rumors of this, that, and the other. But really, the suppliers have been good. And it's going to be interesting to see who really survives. That's one of the reasons, as I think I've told you before, that I'm looking forward to the Fit Show. We'll see who is there, who can afford to be there, because it really isn't rocket science. During this period, the working capital of virtually every company, including the window company, has been reduced, because we have had to expend monies without receiving money. Result, working capital is reduced. There's only really three ways to get working capital, and that's either you can have an investment, somebody can invest, you can borrow it, or you can have working capital out of retained profits. And that's what we've done. I take half of our profits and it gets reinvested in the company. It doesn't always need new machinery, new vans, but it always needs more working capital if you're to expand. So what this will mean is, if the working capital has gone down, and maybe not everybody had such a reserve as the window company, it means that they won't be able to pay so easily on time. That will be interesting, because the fabricators will need people to pay on time, because they've had the same problem. And if for anybody who hasn't realize this problem and sees a lot of money in the bank now, that is only their working capital doing nothing. Prior to lockdown, it was all being used. Now it wasn't used, it's sitting in the bank, but that has gone down, and they'll be surprised how quickly. So the only correlation to rocket science, if they haven't realized, is light the blue touch paper and stand well back, because that's what will happen. But
do you think over the next few weeks, months, we will see a different landscape in the window and door industry than we see now?
I think we definitely will see a different landscape. I think it's only an acceleration of probably what would have come about anyway. There are weaker companies, there are companies that don't have real industry people at the heart of them. So if you've got banks in charge of you, they have a different view. But these things were probably going to come about anyway. And none of us has got that crystal ball. That's your job, Paul, to have that crystal ball. But I don't know who is going to finally survive and in what shape. I think a lot of them will morph into something else. Bigger ones might be broken up. There might be management buyouts. That's what I would do with a lot of those ones that are about. But the ones that do survive are going to be the ones that have got enough capital and enough working capital to go forward. And we'll see. I'm, as I say, looking forward to seeing who comes through it and who is a fit.
Well, I've got to hope that they're all there. Otherwise, there might be a few that miss out. But obviously, far be it from me to suggest that every company should exhibit at next year's Fit Show. But why would I do that? But when you're on record in the press as being somebody who really plans their visit to, one assumes, other exhibitions as well, but certainly the Fit Show. And you go there in some force, don't you, with your team, family members and others, and even one year with your own brochure, I believe, that described the window company.
We did indeed.
Tell me about that.
Well, you can, when you're looking for new suppliers, by the definition of that, they often don't know you. And you can spend a lot of time going onto a stand trying to explain what your company does, who you are, the sort of quantities that you're able to buy, etc. So to cut that out, because time is valuable at the show, it's difficult enough to get round and talk properly to the people that you want to talk to. We produced a synopsis of our company, its aims, and what it was looking for, and dropped this round to all of the people that we were interested in seeing before we got to see them. So you're welcomed onto the stand as being somebody they already know. You might not do business with them, but they know you. And that's worked, and we continue to do it.
When you go to a show, what impresses you immediately? Give me one or two key things that impress you when you walk around a show, and give me one or two things that you see as immediate turn-offs from exhibitors.
Okay, the things that impress are the brightness and the brilliance of the stands. As I walk through those entrance doors, and I'm always there queuing up, ready to go in, and it'll have been opened by the great and the good, and then we're in and off. And I love that first impression of the red and the white, or the purple and orange, or whatever it is that the colors are. I love that. And I always look just to see who bags those stands nearest to the entrance, because I imagine they're at a premium. So that's always interesting. I also like to go around the outside of the exhibition first, because the people that I want to see maybe are existing suppliers will normally be in the center somewhere. I want to see who's coming up, who is new, who can only afford a small stand, but might end up with half the exhibition space in 10 years' time, who knows? So I walk around the side to see who is new and just have a little chat as I go past and make a note, because when I look at the brochure that you produce, it doesn't always tell us enough about those people. So that's what I like. What don't I like? I think it's always a disappointment to see if people don't turn up, and that areas have had to be cordoned off. I think that's a disappointment, because it tells me that the organizers have probably not achieved what they set out to achieve. So that can be a disappointment. But after I've got over that adrenaline rush of seeing the bright lights, it's down to business and that chit chat, and ear to the ground, and you meet so many people that you haven't seen for a long time. You hear things that you don't hear on Twitter, or you know, this is one person talking to one person, and if you look them in the eyes, they'll probably tell you maybe more than they was going to say should, but there you go.
Yeah, that's trick them up. I mean, I have a feeling, a sincere feeling, that a belief that next year's Fit Show, as long as we don't have a double spike in the pandemic and some other disaster waiting around the corner, I genuinely believe that next year's Fit Show will be extremely good, if not the best ever, the biggest ever. Because I think we are very much a touchy-feely industry. We like to do business face to face. We are still an industry of entrepreneurs. I'm looking forward to next year. What do you feel about that? Do you agree with me?
I'm looking forward to next year. We work on financial years, so our year end is at the end of March. And the 21-22 season, I think, will be difficult. I think people will be nervous. I'm talking about the clients will be nervous about how much they should spend. Should they be keeping money back? I think that is going to be a difficult year, 21-22. And we are already forecasting 25% reduction in our turnover. I'd rather reduce the turnover than go out there and join a race to the bottom. We will not be buying business. If it doesn't come in at the right margin, we won't be doing it. So we allow, therefore, maybe 25% down. That said, hopefully by 22-23, how much has to be saved will be done. They will know what their plan is. So I think 21-22 will be making their next 5-year plan. 22-23, they'll be into it, and it'll be more solid and more easy to anticipate what orders will be like for the 4 years after that. But next year is going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. And I think discounting, I hope, disappears. I give you the example, Paul, but people don't always realize it, that if you are looking for a net margin in your business of, let's say, 10%, that 10% is well above the industry average. But let's say that 10% as a net margin, that bottom line, if you give a 2.5% discount, that wonderful MCD, the main contractor's discount, oh, you don't forget our MCD, our 2.5%. I would effectively, if I'm working on 10% net, be giving away 25% of the contribution to the bottom line. If you only, and I think it's more, it's nearer the industry average, only have a 5% net margin, and you give 5% discount, you have no contribution to the bottom line. None. That 5% has taken the lot. So you're working just to stay level. Yes, you're paying the wages and you're keeping the factory going. And there are arguments when it's necessary to take work that is below the normal margin because you need to fill the factory. You've got to have work. And then you have some higher margin and it comes out. But it's very, very dangerous. And it always surprises me if we say, and this goes back to that entrepreneurial part, if we say to a salesman, although we don't have any, but somebody in the company, in the family, right, this can be, we're not going to go any lower than 30% or 25%, whatever the figure is. Blow me, loads of the orders start coming in at that figure. Nobody thinks, well, could we actually get 35%? Yes. That's where the entrepreneur was at the beginning.
Yeah.
But
there are discussions. There are discussions. Now, having said what you have said about the 21-22 being difficult, one would take that as being absolutely a common sense view. Currently, the word is out there, and if we look through the smoke and mirrors, a lot of that around, partly my job, it's got to be said, a lot of companies, and I have discussions behind the scenes as well, of course, a lot of discussions are that factories, fabricators, some of whom we deal with, I think, are actually getting up to steam very, very quickly. Do you think that that is just a false dawn, effectively, that is not going to continue?
It's very difficult for me to talk for the domestic side of the industry because it just isn't our part. And I imagine for a lot of fabricators, that domestic side is a big part of their business. But in the social market, I think it's going to hold up. And I think the fact that a lot of fabricators have been able to get up to speed so fast has been a great help, because we want to get back what has been lost. We're not just trying to carry on trotting along. We're going to break into a canter, and in September, maybe even a gallop. But I'm hoping that we can get back some of this. I can't get any of it back if the fabricators don't fabricate frames. It's as simple as that. Okay. I need them.
On a final note, and we appreciate your time very much today, David. You're involved, you as if you haven't got enough to do, you've put yourself out and you've become, I think, a director of elements of the Glass and Glazing Federation. I think you're a director of Fencer and so the commercial side of the business. What's your prognosis for the industry generally from that point of view? There's been a certain amount of controversy over the past few weeks during shutdown, but are you optimistic about the GGF and its role going forward in our industry?
Yeah. I go back to why we sought out the GGF in the first place. It was for technical information. There was a particular project we were doing and we wanted information, and we found that the GGF had an abundance of data sheets and people in the technical department who really could answer our questions. And it started from there. We became members, and it's not a cheap thing to belong to, but we became members. And once we're into something, we like to be in it. And as you rightly said, I mean, I was on the main board until I rotated off. That's how it works in the GGF, till I rotated off earlier this year. I found that extremely interesting. I can't say I was surprised, but it was reassuring to know how much effort people really do put in, unpaid, into that organization. I'd say that they're conservative. They are not an organization that jumps very quickly from one position to another. But you know, at this moment, I think it's that steady hand that we need in this industry. If I read one magazine one day and another magazine the next day, I can be moving from right to left without any exaggeration. I want to know what is happening in the middle. I want to know what the real feel is, what the possibilities of doing things are. And I became involved in the commercial companies as directors on some of the boards, and I enjoy that. We are a company that uses Fencer. I'm a director of Fencer, and again, I'm amazed at how much effort is put in, but it's considered. It's not that jump left, right. And I think if I look at, I honestly don't take too much notice of the extremes on the left or the extremes on the right, honestly, Paul. But I would, you know, in a generous moment, I would say that the misinformation that's gone on during this crisis was well meant, but that would be in a generous moment. But does it make any difference to me? No. I'm sticking to, I know, a slightly conservative organization, but I like the depth of it. The fact that that technical department beats at the heart of it. So I think it will survive. It'll go forward. It's been a good period of consolidation for personnel. We'll see what happens, Paul. I just know that everybody is doing their best.
David, I very much appreciate your time. Thank you for your contribution, and I wish you and your family well during this time. Let's hope that we are on the climb up during 21, as you say. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and I'll just wish you well, especially with the installation of some frames, I believe, that you're having put into your house.
The scaffolding, the scaffolders were just unloading the truck as I came into this. I expect my house to look something like a hedgehog when I step outside now. Thanks for your time. Cheers.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.